What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I wanted to talk about the big news that has now been officially confirmed, and this is the original Black Ops and Black Ops 2 are being ported over to PlayStation in July. This is something that showed up in some files on the PlayStation database a little while back, and therefore people have been talking about it and speculating about it, but now that it's officially confirmed, I wanted to make a video. And on top of that official confirmation, Treyarch did also say both of them will include campaign, multiplayer, and zombies. Now, the overall reaction I've been seeing to this is very positive. However, this also raises so many questions that just aren't answered at this point, and I basically wanted to go through those big questions in today's video. Because I do think some people are setting themselves up for disappointment. They're overhyping things and expecting a lot of things that are highly unlikely to be coming. Because the big thing to keep in mind here is these are ports, not remasters. It's not like they built those games again from the ground up with all new assets and everything and tons of modern features that we've come to expect with Call of Duty. These are ports, and therefore they're almost definitely going to be basically just one-to-one what we saw back in the day. But in saying that, there still are some questions up in the air when it comes to a port, because ports can do some things at least, as far as maybe upping the quality or performance to a degree versus the console versions at least from back in the day. But then on top of that, I think the biggest question for me is how multiplayer is going to be handled, and I'm very skeptical about this because these games are backwards compatible for Xbox players, so right now, Xbox players can go back and play these games, but the problem is they're essentially unplayable on multiplayer because they're in the same game and matchmaking pools as the Xbox 360 players, and Xbox 360 is not secure at all, and therefore you're just going to run into mod menus and cheaters all the time, making the game effectively unplayable, like I said. So when it comes to the big questions, for me at least, that's the big one. What is happening with the multiplayer with these games? Are we just playing in the same matchmaking pool as PS3 players are currently playing in with these? If so, it's likely going to be the exact same situation where technically you can play it, but it's just going to be infested with cheaters. So the way I see it with these ports is if they do play in these same lobbies as PS3 players, it's just a non-starter. There's no point in even buying these, unless you want to experience the campaign again or maybe zombies. And I'd like to think that they understand that with these ports and we won't end up in those same lobbies. I feel like that's like the bare minimum to get multiplayer going, is you can't have people playing with PS3 players. And if that is the case and they end up separating those, that would be excellent and a lot more exciting for sure. But then there's a big question of, will it be on like the modern dedicated servers, or will we still be using listen servers like we did back in the day where you have a player host that's selected? And along with that, you have like host migrations if the host leaves, and potentially a very wildly inconsistent connection experience and host advantage. Also, circling back a little bit to something I sort of touched on is, will we see any improvements with these ports? Of course, remember, it's not a remaster like we saw with Modern Warfare Remastered, where they had all new assets and everything, and it was built from the ground up on like a modern engine, while still doing their best to stay true to what the original game was. In this case, they're literally just porting the game over, but in doing that, are they able to improve something like frame rates or resolution perhaps? Maybe bring some features that PC players had access to, so it's technically in the game back in the day, but maybe PS3 just wasn't powerful enough to handle it. So maybe some higher graphics settings that PC players had access to back then, so it'll at least look better than it did on PS3. Maybe even some settings that PC players had access to back in the day, like an FOV slider, for instance. That's something that we didn't get on console until fairly recently with Call of Duty. I think that's something that would be a big win as well, but I'm not going into this expecting those things to be there. It's just a little hope that I've got in the back of my mind and a question that I'd love to see answered before we get our hands on these games. Also, apparently, I don't know how accurate this is because it's just what people are saying online. Apparently, this isn't going to be a native PS5 version, but instead, these ports are going to be PS4 version ports, and that means you can still play them on PS5, but they will be the PS4 version of the game, and that likely means no 120 FPS support. Also, back in the day with Call of Duty, there were some frame rate limitations where certain elements of the gameplay were actually locked to your frame rate, and weird things could happen on PC if you got outside of certain bounds with the frame rate of the game. So I wonder if that's also potentially just going to prevent them from doing anything higher than 60 FPS. Next, another big question that's up in the air that we will get an answer to eventually is, what is the cost going to be? How much are they charging for this? Is it going to be a bundle situation where you buy both of these ports as one single bundle, or can you buy each individually? Another big thing on the multiplayer side, and I guess zombies as well, is what about DLCs? Are they going to be just bundled in and included as part of the game, or are they going to try to sell those separate as well? That does seem a little unlikely that they would try to do that, because that would end up splitting up the player base. So even if multiplayer is decently playable, now you're splitting up your player base potentially in a bunch of different ways. And I suspect while this might be really popular at first and there would be a big explosion of players that want that nostalgia that come back, even if the multiplayer is decently playable, I don't think that many people are realistically going to be sticking around long term to the point where it can handle splitting your player base up multiple ways via DLC. But then again, I would love to see that DLC content there, so I really hope that DLCs are just straight up included with these ports. That would make sense, and that would sort of sweeten the pot a little bit as far as encouraging people to maybe want to buy these ports. In either case, that just goes to show how many unanswered questions there are. Those are the main ones, at least, that I have. I've seen some other questions floating around as well, like, will there be crossplay, like with other platforms? That seems extremely unlikely. Although, perhaps, if these are running on their own servers that are separate from the PS3 servers, maybe then we end up seeing a Game Pass release for these on the Xbox side of things as a replacement for the backwards compatibility, so then they wouldn't be playing in those old Xbox 360 servers, and instead they would play on the newer servers and potentially have crossplay. That's actually a big hope that I've had on the Game Pass side of things since Microsoft acquired them. That seemed like a huge opportunity to now own the rights to all of those old Call of Duty games, and why not leverage that for Game Pass, but do it properly where the multiplayer side of the Game Pass version of the game would end up playing on their own dedicated servers that are entirely separated from the Xbox 360 version of the game. That would have been the proper way to leverage the Call of Duty IP, in my opinion at least, if they were actually able to do that well and keep security up, for instance. That, I think, would have been huge for Game Pass, but they really just haven't been doing that, and maybe there's hope for that in the future, but I definitely won't be holding my breath for that. But either way, that's all just speculation and hopes, and I feel like that's a lot of what's going on in the community right now, is people sort of creating a version of what they're hoping these ports will be in their minds, and unfortunately, very likely overhyping it for themselves and setting themselves up for disappointment. So for me, the news of these ports is exciting. I'm definitely very curious to check them out and to see what's going to be coming with them. I've definitely got some high hopes for certain areas as well, but my guard is up a little bit, and I'm definitely going into this with a level of cautious optimism. And I'm trying not to overhype things and create expectations in my mind that may or may not be met by these ports. And by doing that, I hope that I'm just very pleasantly surprised when they come out, that multiplayer works really well, we're not playing in PS3 lobbies, and everybody has a great time with all that nostalgia from the older Call of Duties. But time will have to tell on all of this, and this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. How are you feeling about the idea of Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 ports coming to PlayStation? Is this something you're really interested in? Do you foresee any potential issues with this? Are there any big questions that I didn't cover in today's video that you have about these ports? Just let me know down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.